Hello, thanks very much for joining me this afternoon. Hi Raymond, how are you? Anyone else here? I hope the picture quality and the sound's okay for you this week. I've put quite a lot of effort into trying to improve it after my last few efforts, so I hope it's okay. Right, I'm going to start off with some of the questions that had been sent in to me via private message and on the community page. So the first one is from Peter Wilson from Yorkshire, and he asks, do you mark your fly lines when fishing the hang? Which lines do you mark and what distances do you mark them at? Do you mark all lines at the same distances, and how do you hang? Should take up 10 minutes. Well, Peter, it probably will take up about 10 minutes. I actually mark, for my reservoir fishing, I mark all my lines that sink. So even the super slow intermediates, I mark them up. And the way I do it is with some, usually Glow Bright is what I like to use. And I like to use an orange Glow Bright, and I simply use a bobbin holder, I whip on a small bump, and I do like a bump. Even the sort of modern DI7 lines that I've got the pre-marked things, I still like to lash on some Glow Bright number 5, nice and bright, and then I put a little bit of super glue on, a little bit of varnish. And the reason I do that is I like to feel it. So I mark my line, so 15 feet from the braided loop I'll lash on my marker, and the reason I have it at 15 feet is I can hang, so when I've got the marker to my rod tip, I know that there's 15 feet of line out in the water, and I'll hang anywhere from between 5 seconds to 15 seconds depending on when the fish are coming, and then I'll often slowly figure of 8, 10 foot of line in until that hang marker is in my forefinger. So when I've got that in my hand, I'll do the same again. I'll hang for between 5 and 15 seconds, and then once I've got to 15 seconds, I'll slowly lift my rod up to bring the flies further up in the water column, and often that's when you'll get the take. And it's amazing, sometimes when you're on the reservoirs, you'll get takes when you think you've hung forever. You know, you might be chatting to your friend for a bit, and even then sometimes you'll get a take after 20-25 seconds. So hanging is always worth doing if you want to catch more fish, definitely. That's from a boat. From the bank, it's the same principle, only you've got to be wary that you'll probably be in a lot shallower water. So that's how I would hang my lines. Hi Blackfur, Raymond, glad the sound's good this week. Owen, thanks for joining me. Bad company from Wales. Oh, it's only ever good company from Wales. Rob Roy, I take it you're from Scotland. Thanks for the feedback, guys. I'll go on to, unless any of you boys have got a question, I'll go on to the next question that I've got on my sheet here. So number 2 is from Kevin MacArthur. What is the best lake that you ever fished? Why? From Kevin MacArthur. Well, that's a really unfair question because I love them all, but I think the best lake for scenery's got to be the Lake of Menteith. I mean, it's gorgeous. You've got the hills in the background. You can often see ospreys up in the sky. It's not only that, it's a great fishery. You can catch some bumping fish there, and it can be really good. But as I live in the south of England, I'm a regular visitor to Rutland Water. I don't think there's anywhere quite like it in the country. It's massive, and regardless of how the weather is, you can always find a wee hidey hole to anchor up and fish away. You know, Barnsdale Creek if it's really windy. Or what I found with Rutland, it's very, very rare that you go there and you can't find some part of the fishery that's actually fishing. You know, if you're prepared to travel, Rutland water is hard to beat. And I think you know, many of my Welsh, Irish and Scottish friends would say the same. You know, for all the beautiful fisheries that they've got in their own countries, Rutland's a bit special for loch style fly fishermen. I haven't fished in the big lochs in Ireland, so it's something I'd like to do in the future maybe, and maybe my opinion will change after I've done that. But thanks very much for the question, Kevin. Raymond, when lake fishing, how do you find how deep the fish are and what fly you use? Well, that's a good question, Raymond, and how I do it is by counting. So basically, if you know, for example, a DI7 sinks at 7 inches per second, and you've got a stopwatch in front of you, and you count it down, say 20 seconds, and I've got a little chart as well actually that I made up. So I've made a little chart that I keep, and I can look. So if I count down 20 seconds, for example, I'll be down around 10 feet with my fly line. So, and what I'll do is when I'm searching out fish on sinking lines, I'll use a DI7 or a DI5, whatever the sink rate is, and look at my line sinking chart, and then simply when you catch a fish, whichever countdown you're on, then I can look at my chart and that'll tell me how deep the fish are, if you understand what I'm saying. So basically, count down to 30, the fish are 15 foot deep, I use a DI7, and if I start getting takes at that depth of water, I'll continue on counting down to 20. If I don't, I'll count to 25, I'll count to 30. I mean, I fish, all my boat fishing is done from a drifting boat, generally speaking. So if you're counting any more than 30 seconds, the general scheme of thing is that you'll be past your fly line, and if you're competition fishing, you're obviously then fishing illegally because you're trawling your flies behind the boat. So unless it's a very, very calm day, you can't count much more than 30 seconds to get your depth. But yeah, so I hope that's answered your question, Raymond. Hi Gordy. Hi Lindsay. What's the brand of UV resin you use? I'm struggling to find one with the brush. Gordy, I only use that brand, and what it is, it's UV Bone Dry from Solaris. And I don't think it's any better resin than any of the other stuff that's out there in the marketplace. I think they're all pretty much the same now. But as you point out there, it's that tiny little brush, which I find really useful. It's great for doing little detail on the flies, or if you just want a little thin layer of resin, that brush is invaluable. So the brand is Solaris, and it's the UV Bone Dry Cure. I've been using the same bottle for about a year now, and to be perfectly honest with you, when it runs out, what I'll probably do is scrub up the bottle, clean it out, and I'll just stick some Trout line UV resin in, because I find that excellent as well. It's only the brush that's the big selling point for me. So I hope that answers your question, buddy. Hi Owen, what equipment are you using to do the live videos with the DSLR or camera? Well, I'm glad you've asked that, Owen, because I've gone to some considerable lengths to get this just right. And I think today is probably the first day I'm really happy with what I've got, so I'm going to list what I'm using here. So basically, I've got my MacBook Pro in front of me, which I'm reading your comments of, and the camera I'm using is a DSLR. It's a mirrorless, and it's a Lumix Panasonic G80 or /85. I think the Americans call it the Lumix G85, but in this country and Europe, it's a G80. Now I've got a couple to that, a permanent power cord into it, which comes separately for the Lumix. You can get it on Amazon, and I'm using what's called a cam link to interface my camera with my laptop. Now the sound you're hearing is actually from an external mic, a USB mic that I've got plugged into my laptop, so that's why I'm hoping that both the picture quality and the sound quality on these live feeds is pretty good now. And what I would say is that I'm doing this in my office, and I've got an excellent Wi-Fi connection, which should mean that I can stream it sort of 1080p. I hope that answers your question, Owen. If there's anything else, please feel free to PM me, and I'm more than happy to list the gear that I'm using, if you would like. Hi Jane, thanks very much. Thanks Gordy. Rob Roy, how long do you wait for a bite while fishing from a boat on a big Stillwater? I'm not sure if I'm understanding the question, Roy. Do you mean how long would I stay in one area to wait for a bite, or how long would I hold my flies in the water to wait for a bite? So, log style fishing involves you fishing from a drifting boat, so you're always covering fresh water. Providing you've got a decent breeze, you're always covering fresh water. But if you could clarify that question, I'm happy to answer it. But I would generally give it, if I'm confident I'm in an area where there's fish, I'll give it 1 or 2 drifts. And if I can't catch them, I'll give myself a slap round the head and then change whatever method I'm using to try and catch them, because if there's fish in an area, it's very rare that you can't work out how to get them. Competition anglers, what they tend to do is try and work out the quickest way to get them. So generally, if I'm not catching fish and people around me are catching fish, I will stay and work out what's happening, and eventually I'll get them. And if I don't, I'll start the motor and I'll go away in the huff. So I hope that answers your question, Rob. Hi Lewis, how are you? Yeah, in the one area. So if I'm not getting fish, like I said there, I would certainly change what I was doing. And if there's 2 of you in the boat and you're out with a buddy, generally one of you will latch onto the method, and you'll start to get into fish. Of course, if you're not getting fish and you're on your own and you're just practicing, 2 drifts, and then I would certainly move on to a different area to try and find fish that are willing to take the fly. I hope that answers the question, Rob. Hi Owen, thanks very much. I'm really pleased. I don't like to do things half-arsed, so I'm glad it's a good quality stream. Yeah, Lewis, I can't get over how I went out twice last week, one day after the other, and I was out the day we were allowed to go fishing. Actually, I barely slept. I was up staring at the ceiling, and eventually I was out of my bed at 4 o'clock in the morning, annoying the dog, making a cuppa and that, and then I was on the river, which is an hour from my house, at like 6:15 in the morning. So yeah, I'm really pleased to be back fishing, and I think I mentioned I've done a live tie yesterday of a spent mayfly, and I just think we're in the nick of time for the river anglers amongst us anyway, that the river's absolutely exploding with life, and the fresh fauna's coming through, and it's just a joy to be by the riverside, watching every kind of insect you can imagine hatching. The birds are out in force. Being back fishing is such a great relief to everybody, I suppose, and I think my Scottish pals are out next week, so I dare say we'll be seeing plenty more pictures on Facebook of captured fish. Yeah, brilliant to be back. Shh, in from Scotland. Don't worry, Blackford, it's round the corner. I've seen some of the stuff that was coming out, saying it was 5 miles from the house and all the rest of it, which I think's been sorted out now, and I'm really pleased because I've got a good pal up north. Dave Murray owns Loch Inch Fishery, and he's been very sensible about the whole lockdown thing. He shut his fishery down. He's got on with other jobs around the fishery, but he's played the game, and I think he's really probably helped to save lives, if I'm perfectly honest. And when he's open again, if he wasn't 400, 500 miles away, that's the fishery I would be going to visit. He runs a superb show up there. I don't know if you've been to Loch Inch, but I can thoroughly recommend it after a visit last year. Brilliant stuff. You're very welcome, Rob. There's no more questions on the screen, so I'll just refer back to this is a cracker actually, and it's an anonymous question. Well, it's not anonymous, that would be a lie. The guy messaged me on Messenger, so I know who it is, but at the end of the question he put, please don't say, so I'm not going to say. And the question is, are you a member of the Angling Trust? If not, why not? So a two-part question. It's a bit of a can of worms, and I'm not going to get into it, to be perfectly honest. So I'll be honest, I am not a member of the Angling Trust, and the reason I'm not a member of the Angling Trust is I don't think they do very much for me as an angler. Certainly as a competition angler, I don't think they support our national teams enough, and I don't see why I should support them. That is the bottom line to that question. Now, I could talk on for hours about the Angling Trust, but I'm not going to, because it could get pretty bitter. So, moving on. What was your most memorable competition you ever competed in, and why? Denis Goulding Dublin. Thanks for the question, Denis. It's a hard question, because I've competed in some absolutely amazing competitions. I mean, I've come away buzzing for days after them, and a lot of them I've been with the Soldier Palmers over the years in various angling waters and other competitions. We've had such a good team spirit, and it's been really good. But I think I'm glad you sent this in ahead of time, because it gave me time to really think about the competition that really stands out for me, and it's got to be the 2007 Home International at Rutland Water. And just to give you a bit of context to that, the week leading up to the competition, so for any of you that are not competition anglers, the international competitions, most of the teams turn up 3 or 4 days before the actual match to practice on the venue, and it was no different at Rutland. But unfortunately for the travelling teams, so Scotland, Wales and Ireland that came, the lead up to the competition, it was really windy, foul conditions. It was foul. I mean, I was lucky, I was ahead even of the England team, so I was there the week before, and I practiced during some fantastic periods of weather, and I got a really good method. So I was fishing the bung, and it was just slaying fish. And so come the official practice though, that week leading up to the match, it just blew a hoolie, and it was very difficult to get anything working. And as I recall, the 3 practice days I had, I think I blanked. I think I caught 1 fish, and even on the last day, the team manager was a guy called Graham Watson, and he took me out because I think he was a bit worried I hadn't caught any fish, and I reassured him, Graham, don't worry about me, I've absolutely got this in the bag, I know what I'm doing, I'll be absolutely fine. And the team briefing that night, I think it was Phil Dixon and an RAF chap, I know him really well and I can't even think his name, Simon Gaines. They came in and they'd sussed out that what was really killing fish was something that was called the method. Now, I'll just explain that to you, to those that are unaware of what the method is. Basically, it's a midge tip, it's a 4-fly setup, and on the point you would have a booby, and about 2 feet above that you would have a very heavy buzzer, and then above that you would have a couple of dial backs or crunchers, whatever you fancy. But they'd come in from practice, and I think they'd had something like 24 to the boat, which was like unprecedented. Everyone else had struggled a bit, 3 or 4, but it was tough. And so the team plan was to go out on that, and the morning of that match, I'll never forget it, it was just beautiful. So it was like it'd gone from howling winds and overcast weather to the sun was coming out, and it was gorgeous, a gentle ripple, perfect fishing. And it was more akin to what I'd fished the week before. So when we'd set up, the whole England team had gone out on this method, and I drew Paul Sharp, who at the time was the Scottish national champion, and we'd met up on the pontoon, and he'd already spoken to one of my pals, Dave Murray, and Dave Murray gave him the advice, give Lindsay the engine, he knows what he's doing. Thanks for that, Dave. I'll always remember you for that. And so Paul Sharp said, well, we should flip the coin really, and I said, look Paul, that's fine, let's do it, let's get it over with. He goes, well, we'll wait till we're on the boat. And I said, look, stop messing about, Paul, let's just get it done, I want to know what I'm doing. And in the end, he folded and said, oh, Lynn, you take the engine, Lindsay. Dave assures me you're not going to take me to where there's no fish. And we went out, and my boatman was a guy called Vince Brooks. He's a pretty much of a legend in the England fly fishing log style team. Brilliant angler, and he was going to be the captain for the following match at Menteith that year. So we went out, and he goes, where are you going, Lindsay? I said, I'm going to go up to Fantasy. And everyone was going, well, Vince was saying, I don't know, nobody else is going to Fantasy. I said, we're going to Fantasy. And we went up to Fantasy, and I was on the method because it was obviously slaying fish the day before. And went out, and I had the inside line, so the wind was blowing from the dam down towards the church, and I was casting towards the bank, and I got a couple of fish, and I had a couple of fish after an hour, which was pretty good. And Paul had 3 or 4 fish, but had failed to convert any of them. They just came off, and so after about an hour, I had 2 fish in the boat, and I thought, you know what, this method's not right, I'm going to go to the bung. So I went to the bung, and after 10 minutes I thought, no, I've just had 2 fish in an hour, I'm going to go back to the method. So I went back, I was on it for 10 minutes, I went, no, I'm going back to the bung. And I went back to the bung, and I never looked back really, and I think that day I hooked and played 14 fish. Unfortunately, I only landed 9, which was a shame because 14 fish would have gave me the brown bowl that year. But Paul really struggled, and I know to this day why it was, because after 2 hours he should have been saying, right son, you're off the engine, I'm on the inside line, because the fish were lying near the bank, and I knew that. And England won by a country mile. I think we were £50 worth of fish past the nearest team, and it was a great feeling. And what a buzz it was to be part of that team. I'll never forget that, and that's why it's the most memorable competition I've ever fished in. I hope that answers your question, Dennis, and I haven't bored people to death with that story, but it was a great match. Let's see what we've got. Raymond, I fish small lakes from the banks, no boats, Ellardine at Telford. What would be your starting fly and why? I don't do a great deal of bank fishing. I've done some, Raymond, but if I was starting at because Ellardine's quite a big fishery, it's not a tiny Stillwater, is it? So generally I would start with something like a fast glass, and if I was pleasure fishing I would stick on a big snake, I would cast as far as I could, and I would roly-poly it back. And very often when I've gone to fisheries and I don't know them particularly well, once I've fished the margins, that would certainly be my go-to method for actually catching a few fish. I hope that answers your question, Raymond. Okay, moving on then. 5. Do you fish stocked ponds in the winter? Do you ever fish competitions? What's your go-to method? So very similar to the question I've just answered. That's from Mark McDermot in Bangor. So in the winter, Mark, I tend to hit the river and fish for grayling. I love fishing for grayling. I think they're great fun, and that's what I spend the majority of my winter fishing doing. I very occasionally go to the odd small stocked pond. I fish a competition in January, February, and that's at Manningford Trout Fisheries. That's run for by Ben Bangor, and it's kind of I say competition, it's a very, very friendly event. We turn up, we draw a card from the envelope, and you get a peg, and it's a good laugh. There's a lot of real characters turn up, a lot of the Southwest boys, which we have a real good laugh with, Mark Miles and Dave Drake, guys like that. We just have a giggle, and that's what it's seen as. So I fish the bung unashamedly, and last year I fished that with a blob underneath it, and it wasn't effective, and I was stood next to Mark Miles, who was absolutely slaying them on this method, and what I was missing, the missing ingredient, was a little tungsten bead on the blob, just to sink it down that little bit quicker, and I've got it next year, Mark. I've tied up a few of them. So yeah, I fished the bung with a blob under, or a squirmy, or whatever. The other thing I would do is, as I said before, a snake on a fast glass, roly-poly back, generally always produces results for the winter stillwater fishing. I hope that answers your question. Thanks very much for asking it. Hi Scott, how's things? I hope you're keeping well, mate. Right, let's have a lookie. Hi Lindsay, what pattern of fly would you recommend when trout are feeding on snails? How would you fish these patterns? Thank you, Clive. Snails, right. Snails are they're a tricky one. They can be an absolute curse for anglers. So snails live on the bottom of the lochs and rivers and lakes, whatever you like, and they're often disturbed by fish mooching around in them areas to be fed on, and when they're being fed on at depth, they're a lot easier to catch. And I would recommend you use like a small hare's ear pattern, because the snails can be anything from between 3mm and 6mm. You know, they can get quite big, and but when they're being fed on at depth, a small hare's ear pattern will often catch quite well for you. But sometimes in the heat of summer, snails will migrate in large numbers up to the surface of the water, and what they do is that they latch themselves onto the surface film of the water underneath, and they can be a wee bit more difficult to catch. And a hare's ear with a cul de canard, so basically a cul de canard fly with a little bit of hare's ear dubbing cast into the surface. You can sometimes tempt them that way, but they can be a bit of a curse. I've been caught out a couple of times with fish feeding on snails in the surface film. It can be quite difficult to get them, but that's what I would use, a hare's ear, that kind of thing. I hope that answers your question, Clive. What colour is the blob? I take it you mean the blob that Mark Miles was fishing. Well, I was right by him, and I think it was like a sunburst colour, just plain sunburst. It wasn't bicolour or anything, just plain. So I'm not sure, Blackfur, but you would need to ask Mark, but I think it was pretty much a sunburst colour with a small tungsten bead in it. Hi Starsky, how are you? May I ask, why is there less people using traditional flies now? Is it because modern flies are better, or is it just less fashionable nowadays to use a nice team of traditional wets? I think, Starsky, that there's quite a large following of people that really still enjoy using traditional patterns and wets. I would say more so in Ireland. I hear more of the guys in Ireland, and even in Scotland on the lochs, that they're much more akin to fishing dabblers and bloody butchers and traditional patterns that still do. They don't stop working, you know, that's the thing. So I think a lot of the fly fishing media, magazines, they tend to concentrate around the big Rutland, Grapham, the Midlands reservoirs, where fashion, if you like, has taken over, and blobs and and boobies are rule the roost there. And fashionable is a good word. These flies don't stop working. Things fall in and out of fashion with fly tying. What I would say is that traditional flies are a lot more effort to tie. It takes a lot more time and skill to learn to tie them, whereas tying some frits on a hook, I could probably train my dog to do it in about 20 minutes. It's much easier, it's much more accessible. I'm not saying it's wrong. You can use what you like when you go fishing, and so you should. But the reason that traditional flies have fallen away, in my opinion, is the level of skill it takes to tie them. It just takes a lot more time and effort, whereas tying some of the modern flies now, they're just dead easy to tie. That's why the more traditional flies have kind of fell away, and the folks that are using them are probably getting on a bit in age, so maybe not getting out as much, maybe not on social media as much. That could be another reason, that you don't see more of these traditional flies. But legends like Davy McPhail are still showing people how to do it on YouTube. There's lots of examples of it. I'm always on Davy McPhail's channel for learning how to do things, because he does it in a really easy to follow instructional manner. And at the Vice, you'll not be long getting bored of tying blobs, and I often tie flies that will never see water just because I enjoy tying. So I hope that answers your question, Starsky. I don't know if it's maybe a bit of a shotgun answer, but there we go. I hope that's answered the question for you. I take it you're up in Scotland then, Scott, and desperate for a day out. Okay, I've got another one here from the sheet. Using a drogue in calm conditions, do you think it's necessary? Do you prefer to fish with a drogue in competitions, in normal conditions, in shallow water, i.e. with a good wind blowing? Do you think it affects the fish? That's from George Wilson in Peterborough. I tend to always fish with a drogue unless there's not enough wind, as I'm not getting the boat to move quick enough for me. If I want to cover water, and I generally always want to cover water, the only time I like it really calm is if I know that I'm over a large pot of fish, and the calmer the better then, because the longer you're not drifting, the more time you've got to be on the fish, and obviously you've got more opportunity to catch the fish. So I would generally, even pleasure fishing, I would always use a drogue. And not only that, in calm conditions, if you've got a drogue, it does steady the boat up. So sometimes when it's not windy enough, if you're not using a drogue, the boat can cart round, and if you're fishing a floating line, you're trying to fish static, you can get a lot of drag. So yeah, I would generally always stick a drogue in, unless it was to my advantage not to, if you know what I mean. Now, I think the second part to your question there, if I'm interpreting it correctly, is do I think the drogue scares fish? I think the boat probably scares fish. So as the boat's approaching, so if you're drifting along and the fish are swimming up the wind, I think the fish actually give it a berth. Now, how far out that happens, I'm not so sure. But what I would say is, from a loch style perspective, I would always be casting at an angle, at a 45-degree angle. I would rarely, very, very rarely cast directly in front of me, and unless I know the fish are at distance and I'm catching them at distance, I would always be working the angles, and I would work them the sort of the side of the boat and drifting it round to the side and retrieving the flies at angles. Because I know that as the boat's drifting that way, the fish are giving it a wide berth. Some will come round my side of the boat, some will come round to my partner's side of the boat. So it's always worth fishing out to the side. So often when I'm hanging my flies, I'll see fish come up, and I'm sure it's not the flies that are spooking them. They'll catch sight of the boat, and often they'll swim away. Very often they'll follow a brightly coloured fly up to the top dropper, turn off of that, but they will take the fly below it, which is generally, on my cast, a more drab, imitative pattern. So I don't think the drogue really comes into it. Where the drogue does come into it is if you catch a fish and it goes directly under the boat and into the drogue, and then you've got real dramas. So I hope that answers your question there. Yeah, I've spoke to Davey a few times, Starsky. He's a real gentleman. He's always helpful with advice and tips, and I've never heard a bad word said against him. He's a great chap, and such a high level of skill. You know, I've seen some of his bulk tying, and one fly is just like a pea in a pod to another fly. So yeah, top bloke. But there are, you know, don't get me wrong, it's not just Davey McPhail. There's I don't know if you've seen a channel, it's run by Barry Ord Clark, and I think the channel's called The Featherbender. Now, I think he does a lot of different clever techniques that, you know, I would say where you have to be pretty competent fly tyer initially before you can really try and engage with these techniques, because a lot of them that I've tried and I really like them, and I'm now employing some of these now in my own tying. But that's a great channel if you want some top instruction. If you're looking for a channel just for flies that catch fish, you're not going to go far wrong with Dave Downey's fly tying. You know, he ties flies that are out and out fish catchers. You know, I don't see anything complicated with what he's shown you, but sometimes that simplicity is the best way to success. You know, yeah, there's a lot of great guys out there. I think, in fact, during the lockdown, I've seen a number of channels arise, and you know, we've got Carl Nixon, phenomenal fly tyer, Stevie Cullen. We've got some, in fact, forget fly tying, just general fishing. We've got two of the best anglers in the world, in my opinion. Howard Croston's got a channel. It's absolutely superb. Some of the tips off it. I mean, I've been fishing competitively for 30 years, and I've done the rivers competitively for 10 years. And even though I've got that kind of time behind me, I'm still getting stuff from these videos. You know, the guys are coming up with little tips that I've either gone over my head or I've just missed them. And to be honest with you, I don't miss much. I live and breathe fly fishing, so there's very little goes past my BDI, and I'm still learning stuff for these guys. They're just at the top of the game. There's another channel, The Anxious Angler, and that's Terry Phillips. He's been national champion a couple of times. I think he's got a cap in every discipline of competition fishing. So these guys, you know, they're worth watching. I seen a post on Facebook the other day for a pal actually saying, "Oh, stop videoing your fishing and blah blah blah, just get on with fishing." That's great, but not everybody can go fishing. You know, the guys in Scotland, they've been locked down for a couple of months now. It must be torture. I'm sure the dog must be getting a kicking every other day, waiting to get out fishing. But yeah, so when I can't go fishing, I'm watching fishing, or I'm looking at Facebook and just looking for inspiration for new fly patterns and ties. So yeah, absolutely, there's quality out there. You've just got to sift the, I don't know what the turn of phrase is, but the quality from the not so good quality. But you know, I just think it's great that people are trying to put stuff out there to help folk. That's what it's all about. That's what fly fishing should be all about, really, is helping people get into the sport. And the same with fly tying. Don't make it difficult for folk saying you must have teal blue ripped from the backside of a peacock and dyed by such and such. for this pattern to be called this. There's nothing makes me get a wry smile on my face faster than them comments. Well, that's not a Silver Invicta because you haven't used silver tinsel number 5 made in 1840 by Robbie Burns. Bollocks. Just use what you've got, enjoy yourself, and you know, encourage others to have a go. That's what it's all about. Right, I'll move back to my my sheet. Hi Lindsay, I noticed you use dyed black grizzle hackle in a few of your videos. I was wondering if there was a specific reason rather than using black cock hackle. And that's from Gary Martin. That came via message on Facebook. And the reason, Gary, that I use the black grizzle hackle is because it's one of my only decent capes. So I don't have a really good black cock cape. And these capes, you know, that black one that you're speaking of there, that was £50. So, you know, I don't get sponsored by any sort of fly tying companies that send me these capes for free. If I want a cape, I've got to physically go out and buy it, and 50 quid a chuck, it's a lot of money. Well, it's a lot of money to me, you know. If you're rich and you can afford to do that, then please feel free to go and buy the whole colour range of capes and do what you like. But when you're actually buying them out your own pocket, I use what I've got. As I went on in my last rant, I just use what I've got available to me. I've got a question coming up actually, which is quite a good one. So it might link into that a bit for you. So let's have a look. I have added all them channels. It has what has kept me going here in Scotland. We'll all go out the window once I get out though. But the thing is, Blackford, that's a great point. I mean, I've spent my fair amount of time on YouTube as many people, many anglers that have been locked down throughout this whole COVID-19 crisis, as you know, they've watched YouTube, they've watched Facebook. I mean, some of the arguments that have been on Facebook during this carry on, it makes you laugh. People have coped with not being able to go fishing in their own way. Some people have exploded on Facebook, which is it's pretty entertaining to watch. But a lot of people, like Howard and you know that I've mentioned, they've started YouTube channels, and some of the information that they've delivered has been absolute gold. Yeah. But if you can take just one nugget from one video, when you're out in the water next time, you might go, you know what, I'm going to try that, and you might catch a fish. And I think when you employ these new techniques that you've learned from Facebook or YouTube, and you get a fish and you get some success, it encourages you to do it again and again until you know it becomes second nature. You're no longer thinking about it. So the hang, for example, I mean, I do the hang religiously because I know it works. You know, I've had days where if you didn't hang, you just wouldn't catch fish. It's simple as that. And I'm not joking. I've had days where every single fish I've caught in my bag has come to the hang. And the guy next to me who's not hung has really struggled. He might have got one or two, or in some cases none. So, you know, these little nuggets, you employ them, you get success with them, keep doing them, and it just makes you better. So I hope that's helped out a bit. So my last question, and again this has come from someone I know, but they've asked to remain anonymous, and the question's simple: is are you sponsored? Well, what I am is a supported angler by Witchwood. So each year they give me a budget of £500 to spend on their products, and this year I think I ordered the new boat seat, I ordered a rod carrier, and oh yes, I ordered the new RS2 rod and the new reel that goes with that for dry fly fishing in small waters and rivers. So to that point, I'm supported by Witchwood, and if I want to order any kit from Witchwood, I can then get that at trade. So that's as far as my sponsorship goes. Now, I'll be honest with you, I am supported by other companies. So, and I'll list them, I'm happy to list them. So I'm given hooks by Frantahanak. They supply all the hooks for the videos I do in the fly tying. I don't pay for them, which I'm very, very grateful for. To do this kind of thing, it takes a lot of time, effort and money. You know, I've spent a small fortune on the camera kit, and I've spent quite a small fortune on fly tying materials to do the videos. But having the hooks supplied just takes one of them burdens off you. Trout line from Romania, Lucian, has been really generous to me over the years, actually. Not even before I started doing the videos, Trout line always supported my efforts with my photographs on Facebook. They would send me materials to use, fly tying, new stuff, and they've been very generous over the years, so supported by them. Andrew Ellis of Scruffy Dubbing has been very good to me over the years. He's you know, when I've been very pernickety about the dubbing I want, he's gone away and blended me up some fantastic stuff, and he sends that to me free of charge. I'm trying to think who else. I don't want to miss anybody out that's really looked after me. Tom Hunt from Hunt's Original, he's been very generous with the flotation powder that he supplies, the Hunt's Original mud, which I'm a huge fan of, and he's given me that over the years, and I've been again very grateful, because when I get little bits and bobs like that through, you can call it sponsorship, it just helps me alleviate my costs, because going fishing is not cheap, and it just helps. It really helps. So am I sponsored? Nobody pays me a cent. I don't get one penny from anybody for doing product reviews or mentioning fisheries. Nobody pays me. That's the bottom line. I'm helped out by the companies that I've mentioned there, and that's that. So am I sponsored? Kinda. What I would say is I'm supported, and I'm really grateful for the support, but I'm not sponsored. So when I do a product review, I'm giving my honest opinion of what I think of the product, not because somebody's paid me to do so. And I do the videos, well, one, because I can, and two, because I really enjoy it, or what would be the point? I enjoy the interaction, and I enjoy doing it. So thanks very much for that question, and I'll be making sure I get a beer out of you when I meet up with you next. It's a bit of a cheeky one, that. That's all the questions I've got on my sheet. Let's have a look. Raymond, yes, I use YouTube for fly tying, and met Barry Clark at the Stafford show and got his book. I've not got his book, Raymond, but I'm quite tempted to get it. And actually Barry's, and here's an exclusive, Barry's agreed to tie a little fly for me the next BFFI show, so he'll be featured in one of the BFFI videos, and I may well be tempted to buy the book then and get Barry to sign it for me, so I've got a signed copy. But yeah, he's a very precise fly tyer, and there's a lot to admire about his work. Right folks, that's 45 minutes. If there's no questions, I'll probably draw it to an end. I'll give you a couple of minutes if there's any other questions before we call it a day. It's just ginger beer, honest. It's not dark and stormy, which is what I wouldn't mind be drinking on a Sunday afternoon in this lovely weather we're having. Okay folks, get his book, then it's really a good book, I'm sure it is. I've watched a few of his videos, Blackfur, and they're outstanding. They're, you know, really, really helpful to me. The one thing I would say, Barry or Clark, that I'm grateful for is the parachute flies. That technique where you clean off one side of the hackle before winding it round. I'm addicted to that now, and it's like a little personal challenge. Every fly I tie, I'm trying to get the perfect hackling, and I really enjoy it. Going for a dram after this? No, I'm probably going for a dog walk, if I'm honest with you, Lewis. I'll not be getting a dram at this time of day. Owen, started my channel for the same reason, just enjoying filming and editing them. Great stream. Thanks, Owen. Yeah, you know, why not? And, you know, I had a couple of people actually say to me, well, why do you always link into other channels? And the reason I do that, the reason I link, so in some of my videos I'll link to other videos. Why would I not link to Davy McPhail, who does things 100 times better than I ever could? Such as the dyeing, for example. You know, he dyes his own materials. I've bought the stuff. I've yet to negotiate with my wife which pan I could use to dye stuff. So that's why I've not done it yet. But Davy McPhail, he's your man. He dyes his stuff. He does a video showing you how to do it. It's brilliant. Why not? Barry or Clark, parachute flies. Why would you not reference them videos? You know, if somebody's doing something better than I can do it, of course I'm going to reference them. So, yeah, the more the merrier. And best of luck with your channel. It's great fun. I've enjoyed it. I've been doing it for just over a year now, and it becomes a wee bit of an addiction, actually. You know, you're like, oh, what am I going to do for next week's videos? And will this work? Oh, I wonder how popular this will be. And, you know, but what I would say to you, Owen, and I would say this to any of the new YouTubers that are just kicked up because of lockdown, is you've got to keep going. You know, the first sort of 6-7 months, growth is slow. You know, I think, you know, I remember putting my first video up and the kids were laughing their arse off, saying, oh, you're too old for YouTube, nobody will watch your stuff, you're boring. Yeah, that's because they don't drink. But yeah, it takes a long time to make it work. And you know, I look at David McPhail, 89,000, that's the dream. I'm going to keep going, and I'm going to keep putting out good content, and hopefully I'll one day, when I'm drawing my pension, I'll be as popular as David McPhail. Who knows? You'll never know unless you keep going. Yeah, totally agree, Blackfur. The days of secret squirrel for me are finished. I'll go along to these competitions. You know what? I always used to say to people, actually, oh, you know, how are you going to fool people? You know how to trick a competition angler? Tell him the truth. Just tell him exactly what you're doing. He'll shake his head and walk away and say, he's a dick, he never tells you anything. Right, folks, if there's no more questions, I am going to call it a day. Okie dokie then. Stay safe, and if you're in Scotland, tight lines for next week. If you're in Wales, make sure you can only walk to your fishery, and hopefully I'll do another one of these in a month or so. Take care, guys. Thanks for tuning in.